I've filmed a number of castles over the years, from big tourist attractions like Bamburgh Castle to hotels like Lumley Castle and ruins like Tully Castle in Northern Ireland. But this castle, Featherstone, is quite different because this one isn't actually open to the public, it's a private estate. And today, I've been allowed inside to have a look around and film and take you fine people with me. So join me in this video where we'll explore the history of Featherstone Castle and the ghost story. Featherstone Castle lies on the Anglo-Scottish border in Northumberland, about 3 miles southwest of the town of Haltwhistle. The present owner is John Clark, who has long family connections to the area, but today is managed by his nephew Simon Prinz and his wife Ruth. Very lovely people, and I'll let Simon detail you some of the history of the castle for us.
The castle was first owned by the Featherstone halves, and there is some sort of discussion as to where that name come about. I know from my uncle and talking through a lot of history, which has come down through my uncle, that one of the thoughts is the Featherstone halves, is the half meaning half of the river, the half land, and Featherstone be feudal stone. It was the feudal stone, so they'd come and pay their various tithes, their taxes and so on, onto the feudal stone. So Featherstone, feudal stone. The first sort of name that we sort of know about in this sort of history is the Haltwhistle Featherstone half, and that's around about 1212. And there's also then goes through to Albany Featherstone half, and there is a sort of a story that Walter Scott sort of wrote about. There was a poem actually about how he was murdered.
This poem or ballad is recorded by Sir Walter Scott and details the historical event of the slaying of Albany Featherstone half by the Ridley family in 1530. Remember this name, Ridley, because we'll be revisiting this later on. However, it was the English Civil War that proved to be the undoing of the Featherstone half family. Timothy Featherstone half received a knighthood for his gallantry from Charles I, but paid for it later when he was executed following the Royalist defeat at the Battle of Worcester. The last original member of the Featherstone half family to live here was Abigail, born in 1627. At some point in the 1660s or 1670s, she either sold the estate or had it seized. The castle had new owners and it was remodelled and enlarged.
It was then part of the Howard estate for a period after that. They then did get it back later on in about 1712-ish, and it remained in their hands until it was then sold to Lord Wallace, who was Attorney General. They had the castle from the late 1700s and did a lot of the extensive alterations work and made it into the castellated structure that you see today. The oldest part was that you can see standing now is from 1348, the Peel Tower, and that's all related to the border reivers, and it was a defensive structure. So predominantly the castle was a defensive structure, and it was from a Peel Tower. But there are other bits of buildings which and areas of it which actually date beyond that as well.
Now, like any good castle, Featherstone has a ghost story, and so for this, we head back in time to when the original Featherstone half family were the owners here. There was once a young lass that lived here at Featherstone Castle, the daughter of the Baron, and she was in love with a lad from the Ridley family residing not too far away. They'd often go out together, riding on the moors or sitting beneath a tree and discussing their future. They were the perfect match, except not in the eyes of the girl's father. He was well underway in arranging a suitable marriage for his daughter, often called Abigail in the story. She was to be wed to a distant relative, a man of status and wealth. He certainly wasn't going to allow his daughter to marry some young Ridley boy, not only a poor man but an enemy of his house. Naturally, when the Baron told his daughter that he will henceforth be outright forbidding her from seeing this Ridley lad, she was devastated, and informing her of this arranged marriage to an older, distant relative was likewise a huge emotional blow. Her father would try and cushion the blow with words like prospect and position, but this meant nothing to the girl. "I don't love him, father," she'd say. "Well, you will learn to love him," he'd respond back with. She tried for weeks to persuade her father to call off the wedding and allow her to be with the man that she was actually in love with, but he wasn't going to budge. The Featherstone lass managed to meet the Ridley boy in secret one day when her father was out, and he was heartbroken as well. Being told by the girl he loved that they could never be together, it was more than he could bear. The wedding date was set, and nothing could stop it. The young girl was led up the aisle at Haltwhistle Church in the arms of her victorious and somewhat smug father. Abigail's heart sank as she saw the dull and unimpressive man that was to be her husband, waiting for her at the altar. Back at the castle, a great wedding banquet was being prepared in this room, the Stone Hall. Guests were arriving for what was promising to be a marvellous night of celebration. But first, as per custom, the married couple had to ride out for a hunt. The bride and groom, the wedding party, and the relevant servants and staff proceeded to ride out onto the moors. Yet, little did they know that here, just north of the castle, in a dense wooded area known as Pink and Clough, there was an ambush waiting for them. It was the Ridley boys, Abigail's young lover, eager for revenge. He knew Abigail needed to be rescued, and the vile swine that had stolen her had to be taught a lesson. His men-at-arms, loyal men all, likewise young and longing for a fight. The Ridleys sprang from the trees when the party passed through. "Ambush!" screamed the groom, drawing his sword. The guests in the party likewise all drew their weapons, and a bloody foray then proceeded to take place. Ridleys and Featherstone Hoffs cut each other to pieces. The young Ridley lad, looking for Abigail, pushed his way through the fighting crowd and spotted the man that had taken his true love. The two men charged each other, each fighting to protect the Featherstone Hoff girl. But the experienced groom soon got the better of the young Ridley boy and took him to the ground. Just as he was about to finish him off with his sword, his bride, Abigail, jumped in front of him. "No, stop!" she screamed. But the groom had no time to react. His sword plunged deep into his young bride's breast, killing her. Seeing his chance, the Ridley boy got to his feet and killed the groom, leaving him the only man standing. He looked around, the hunting party, his loyal men, and his beloved lass, all lay dead. Distraught and overcome with grief, the young Ridley lad fell on his sword. Nobody left Pink and Clough alive that day. Back in the hall of Featherstone Castle, the Baron sat at the feasting table and eagerly awaited the return of the married couple and the hunting party. But hours passed, the food became cold, guests left, and the musicians fell asleep. Riders were sent out to look for the party, but returned with no news. The Baron grew increasingly anxious and waited at his seat at the table until midnight, when the sound of hooves could be heard outside. The doors flung open, and in came the bridal party. They slowly entered the hall and took their places at the table, but all of them were covered in terrible wounds. Blood poured from gashes in chests and arms. It dripped from noses and mouths. Each spectre looked cold, white as a sheet. The Baron's eyes were drawn to his beloved daughter, Abigail, her face void of the warmth that she was once known for. Her wedding dress covered in blood. And having sat for a moment, every member of that wedding party faded away as a cold blast swept the room, blowing out all of the candles. The Baron was once more alone, and wept until dawn in that cold, dark hall. This event was said to have taken place on the 17th of January, and supposedly on that date every year, the bridal party can be seen riding up to the castle. It's said that Albany Featherstone Hoff, that Simon mentioned earlier, the man from Scott's ballad who's killed by a Ridley, is the Baron from this story. Clearly at some point there was a conflict between the two families, and the full truth has been lost to history. It's also said in the story that at the scene of the tragedy in Pink and Clough, the blood of the young Ridley boy dripped into a hollow of a stone, and a raven that had sat in a tree and watched the whole massacre take place flew down and drank from the hollow, giving it the name the Ravenstone. There's no Ravenstone on any map though, and I searched the area for over an hour. If the stone is still here, then it's likely buried or hidden somewhere very difficult to find. Featherstone Castle is a really beautiful spot, and there's a lot of hidden gems in the area. In the castle's back garden, there's the remains of a World War II prisoner of war camp where thousands of Germans were held until 1948. Something that I'll explore in another video one day. It was a great privilege to be allowed to film here, and I'm grateful to Simon and Ruth for showing me around, and to Gary, the estate manager, for helping me organise it. He makes a damn fine cup of tea as well. But while the castle is private, you too also have an opportunity to visit.
The castle is available for hire, for functions. It works very well for family gatherings and various other parties and functions. So you can, if you go to the website, www.featherstonecastle.com, you'll see the details are on there, and you can then get in touch with us and we can work out how we can make it work for your particular event or function.
There's also a stable yard cottage that will be available for bookings in the summer, which sounds really nice. So again, if this magnificent castle is a place you fancy staying, it's now entirely possible.